Thank you, Senator.
Bueno, buenos días. Bienvenido a la capital de los Estados Unidos. Welcome. Pero ese buenos días estaba como todavía están dormidos, ¿no? Buenos días. Ahora sí. Okay. So, welcome. And before I start my formal remarks, since this is the first public event I've been at today, I want to say that my thoughts and prayers are with the families of those who lost a loved one on September 11th, 11 years ago today, including the 700 New Jerseyans who lost their lives on that fateful day. And it is fitting and appropriate that we remember them all the time, but certainly on this most significant day. Let me thank our event sponsors, Service Employees International Union, Eliseo Medina, who does such a fantastic job there, and all of you for participating in this year's CHCI Public Policy Conference, and 3.5 decades of commitment to our community, to the next generation, now nearly 2 generations that have been served by the CHCI efforts. You're going to have an incredible group of distinguished panelists that represent the spectrum of our lives in this country, an extraordinary group of Latinos, an extraordinary group of Americans, from journalists to labor leaders to Olympic gold champions. It's going to be an extraordinary panel. And we are poised for a lively, informative, and necessary discussion to evaluate how Latinos have played an integral role in the development of this nation and what role we will play continuing today and in the future. So let me try to frame the discussion by saying that this year, as we convene and begin to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, let us keep one very important point in mind. And let's keep it foremost in our thoughts and in our hearts. And that is, it is time that we stop talking about what the Hispanic community will contribute to the American story one day, and start talking about what it has already contributed to this great country, what it has already achieved, and the contributions it will continue to make to the great history of this country. We need to proudly celebrate that contribution, despite the hardships, despite the hard times, sometimes despite the hard knocks and the obstacles that have been put in our way, and some that may still exist today as we face challenges in different states to our community. Now, I've spoken about the contribution of Hispanic Americans to this great American country and its culture and society many times before. As a matter of fact, the reason I wrote my book, Growing American Roots, was because I was tired of listening to television commentators. I won't mention who they are, but they all suggested that we came here yesterday, that we are takers from this society, not givers, and I just couldn't take it anymore. When in fact, those of us who know about our history know that Hispanics in America did not begin yesterday, and it certainly didn't even begin a decade or 2 ago. We have been part of American history for centuries. The individual stories tell us a lot. The oldest city in America, St. Augustine's, Florida, which will now celebrate its 500th anniversary, was founded by Pedro Menendez de Aviles. I'm doing a title search to see if there's any family connection so that I can make claims. But the oldest city in America, 500 years ago. Ken Salazar, our Interior Secretary, his family goes back to a history with the land in Nuevo Mexico and Colorado for several centuries. Several centuries. I look at the fact that there's a reason that there are American cities in this country called Santa Fe, Los Angeles, Las Cruces, and states called La Florida, Nuevo Mexico. There is a reason for all of that. And in terms of our service to the nation, we have honorably served in every action since before the founding of the nation. In the American Revolutionary War, Bernardo de Galvez, the governor of then the territory of Louisiana, led an all-Spanish contingent against the British advance on George Washington to give George Washington the time to be able to recalibrate his troops. Bernardo de Galvez. We fought on both sides of the Civil War. If you come visit here in Washington to Farragut Square, I think few Americans who pass by understand that Farragut Square is named after David Farragut, a Spanish ship captain who led the naval forces during the Civil War on behalf of the Union and ultimately made the famous American phrase, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," a slogan that everyone knows. David Farragut, a Spaniard, in the Civil War of the United States. A dozen Latinos were among Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders. In World War I, an Army pilot, David Cantu Barkley of Laredo, Texas, of Mexican descent, volunteered to penetrate German lines in France, was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. Among the heroes of World War II, Alejandro Ruiz, an Army private who fought in Okinawa and was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroic conduct in the face of overwhelming odds. Private Ruiz wrote in a letter that sums up the service of all Hispanic Americans to our great country. He said, "I never questioned my duty because I believe that as Americans we have a responsibility to serve our country and preserve our way of life and freedoms. All I can say is I did what I had to do." And I think that sums it up. He did what he had to do, as did that all Puerto Rican contingent, the 65th Infantry Division, during the Korean War, one of the most decorated infantry divisions in the history of military service to this country. So we have a long history that now goes to even modern times. The first American to die in the service of his country in Iraq was Lance Corporal Jose Gutierrez, a Guatemalan who was not even a United States citizen when he gave up his life for this country. And that is why I bristle when I listen to questions about our community's patriotism and commitment to this country in the immigration debates we have in this nation. Lance Corporal Jose Gutierrez, a Guatemalan who shed his life on behalf of America, even though he was not a United States citizen. And so we have a history of standing up for the nation and defending it. But those are just some dimensions. We have continued over time. Jose Hernandez, a retired NASA astronaut. He grew up the son of Mexican migrant workers, barely speaking any English. But math was universal. 2 más 2 is 4 in whatever language you say it. The person who grew up more or less at the same time I was growing up in a tenement in Union City, she was growing up projects in the Bronx. Sonia Sotomayor, today one of 9 Supreme Court justices, graduating at the top of her class. When she was applying to a great New Jersey institution, Princeton University, she did not even know what Ivy League meant until some of her friends told her, and she started applying to college. You cannot turn on our radio and not listen to the sounds of Latin music. Emilio and Gloria Estefan revolutionized American music, introducing Latin beats to Main Street pop. And today you cannot turn on the radio without hearing Latin artists like Mark Anthony, Pitbull, or my favorite Shakira across a variety of stations. And no, I love her music, and hips don't lie. So, and you cannot turn on the nation's television without seeing Eva Longoria, one of the most notoriously known Desperate Housewives, or Sofia Vergara in Modern Family that has taken over primetime television on one of America's biggest networks. And when it comes to American journalists, you have Juan Williams at Fox, you have José Díaz Balart at Telemundo, Jorge Ramos at Univision, and so many others. So as we celebrate this year, and now move to the present and think about the future, we are America's largest but fastest growing minority. Salsa outsells ketchup, tortilla outsells white bread, and guacamole is the dip of choice. Hispanics number more than 52 million people in the United States. There are, in my home state alone of New Jersey, we've seen this dramatic rise, 1.6 million alone, accounting for nearly 1 of every 5 New Jerseyans. Latinos represent one of the largest and fastest growing segments of our population, the largest racial or ethnic minority group in 25 states, half of all of the nation. As the Latino community numbers grow, so do our positive contributions to this economy. There are more than 2.3 million Hispanic-owned businesses nationwide, and Hispanic-owned businesses continue to increase even in this difficult economy. The greatest rate of growth of small and mid-sized businesses are Latina-owned businesses, and we are thrilled to see that happen. We generate billions of dollars in economic output every year, and we have created millions of jobs that help get our country back on track. And with that economic growth comes an increased political, cultural, and social influence, an opportunity to change the conversation from one hoping to have a seat at the table to truly impacting the outcome of the debate. More than half of the overall population growth in the nation, over half is Hispanic. So it is clear, as we have seen in these presidential elections, that we have a growing political influence at the ballot box and decision about who sits at the table and what's discussed. And in fact, I personally believe, if you look at the states that are up for grabs in this electoral context, that Latinos will decide who is the next president of the United States of America. It is clear that we are everywhere and part of everything that this nation has to be proud of. We have growing economic power, growing political and social influence, as evidenced by the best and brightest we see in this room and will see over the next several days. And despite challenges, we are poised to use our place at the American decision table to be part of the solution and help America realize its full potential. So let me close with the future. The future. Within the next decade or so, 1/3 of all of the nation's school children sitting in a classroom will be Latino. That means that 1/3 of the nation's competitive future will be Latino, which is why CHCI and I personally in the United States Senate am driven on education as one of our core values for us and for our country. Because as one of us will clean the kitchen in the kitchen knife in one of the events we'll have somewhere cleaning it up in the kitchen, another one of us is going to hold a surgeon's knife in an operating room. And how well educated and trained that individual will be incredibly important to the lives they will touch. If you told me growing up poor in a tenement in Union City, the son of immigrants, the first in my family to go to college, that I could rise to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 308 million people, at that time in my life I would have said that is not possible. But it is the promise of America fulfilled, and it is a promise we must keep true for future generations of Americans, future generations of Latinos that are going to be at the core of creating American competitiveness. And that is part of what our commitment is at CHCI. We are also looking at the fact that as the rest of the nation grays, the Latino community is younger by a decade. And so that means as the rest of the nation grays, they will increasingly look to us for the quality of their life. And again, how well educated and trained we are will be incredibly important, far beyond the confines of our community. We are natural ambassadors for trade and commerce to over 21 countries in the world, countries in which understanding language and business customs is incredibly important to penetrate markets on behalf of American companies' products and services. And if you don't believe that, just a simple example of that, when Chevrolet tried to sell the Chevy Nova in Latin America, it didn't move. And trying to sell a car that says Genova ultimately is a tough marketing proposition. That's just a simple example of language, but there is so much more in understanding business customs in our countries of the southern part of the hemisphere. So in those respects and so many more, we have an entrepreneurial spirit in our community that is one of the strongest of any group in the country. And so we are drivers of a future economy because of our numbers, because of our educational attainments, because of the number of children who will be in our schools, because that we are younger by a decade, because we are multilingual, multicultural, understand the impacts that means for the nation. So I look to the future with enormous hope of what we, as Hispanic Americans, will contribute as we have since the founding of the country to this great country. We need to frame our discussion in terms of our rich past, the contributions we have made, and only then realize that the future of Hispanics in America has already been written by the many contributions that we have already made, that those on whose shoulders we stand on. It's time to be proud of our history, to remember it, to talk about it, and to realize that it's time that we stop talking about what we will contribute in the future and celebrate what we already have. Today, in this opening plenary panel discussion and summit series sessions, we need to change the conversation from what we may someday do to the tremendous reality of what we have contributed and the promise that we provide for tomorrow. And I hope that as part of that promise, after these elections, the nation will come to understand that it will be far better off, because I believe this is the civil rights issue of our time, that we cannot allow all of us who are sitting here, all of us who may be U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents, if you think that the issue of immigration reform is about someone else, then you are sadly mistaken. Because when in Arizona, when in other parts of the nation, there are laws that say, show me your papers, how does anyone decide in law enforcement what is the basis of asking you to show me your papers? Is it because of the way you look? Is it how you dress? Is it how you speak? I have a young man, Mexican American, who served this country in Iraq, was detained for over 30 days in an immigration detention facility, a United States citizen, because of the community in which he was in which there was a raid. At that moment, he did not have papers. Imagine being a U.S. citizen, serving your country honorably, and being detained for 30 days in an immigration facility. I, for one, so long as I am in the United States Senate, and I hope you will join us in this as we think about tomorrow, will never accept being a second-class citizen in the United States of America simply because of the happenstance of who we are. So we need to have that fight. So as we have contributed so much, we must make our rightful claim as well about the dignity that we deserve and we have earned. And I believe very clearly that our nation will prosper and grow even more as the largest community, the minority community in the country, as the Hispanic community continues to grow and prosper. Muchísimas gracias y adelante, porque es la única forma en que vamos a realizar nuestros sueños, nuestros conceptos y sobre todo nuestra posición en este país de poder contribuir ilimitadamente. Ya lo hemos hecho. Tenemos que recordarnos de eso, pero también tenemos que mirar al futuro, pero tenemos que hacerlo con una unión, porque en la unión está la fuerza. Y en ese sentido, me recuerdo de lo que se dijo Simón Bolívar, cuando le preguntaron, ¿vas a liberar el resto de los países de Latinoamérica? Y él dijo, hemos visto la luz y no vamos a regresar a la oscuridad. Nosotros hemos visto la luz y no vamos a regresar a la oscuridad. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much.